Hey friends, I have a snippet of a very interesting conversation we had last night on our masterclass, and I wanted to break it down in a little bit more detail and share it with all of you here because I'm going to clear some misconceptions and give you some inside info into how this development process really works from a developer's perspective. Okay, now this diagram here, I didn't create this. I got to give a credit to Costas who put this together, and with his permission I'm using it here. But this is a diagram of a typical condo building. Think your Toronto typical condo building, multiple stories, as much density as it can get. And what's happening here is that the costs are broken down so you can see where the share of costs are going in a building. So let's start with land value, and that can range tremendously depending on location. Especially in the GTA in Southern Ontario. And, it could be that this particular developer has owned the land for 5, 10, 20 years, which is why you see such a disparity between 10 and 30%. But it is an accurate percentage. Construction costs, 30 to 40%. Of course, that's going to vary given the type of building you're building, how much luxury you're putting in, finishes, all that kind of stuff, but very accurate. Soft costs, and there's a million soft costs, but think engineering, land planning, floor plan design, architectural, all that kind of design stuff and soft costs you need to get the building and designs in place to get to the point of site plan approval. That is soft costs. And then you have two big chunks right here. We have government charges, which is just behind here, which we're going to cover in a second. But let's talk first about profit margin. Now, everyone thinks developers are greedy, and in some cases they are, but they're businessmen and women, okay? And greed is just a really bad word to use in that sense. Is they will take profit wherever they can, because think if it costs them $100 million to build this building, their margin is just 7 to 13%. It's not the 10, 15, 20, 25% that most people think it is. It's a slim margin of 7 to 13%. And it still makes sense to build these buildings with that profit margin, because when you think about let's say 100-unit building, and each unit is going to sell for $600,000. I'm just making up numbers here. That's a $600 million in sales, right? That kind of profit margin, even with this small margin percentage, still makes sense from a profit perspective, right? So that's how the business works. But let's take this into consideration here, and let's assume we've had a bit of a dip in our market, like we've had here in the GTA in Ontario, across Canada and the US, to be honest. But let's talk about Ontario. Let's say prices on average have dropped 10%. Okay, so if your profit margin was sitting at a max of 13% or even 15%, and prices dropped 10%, are you going to build this building for a meter profit margin of 3 to 5%? Probably not. Okay, why would you go through all that pain, expense, time, and effort, and put yourself out there and put all those risks in place just to make 3 to 5%? Let me ask you another question. If the market drops 10%, and your profit margins are in this range, does that mean government charges, soft costs, construction costs, and land value all go down 10% also? No, it doesn't. Your land value is your land value. Your construction cost is static, and in fact increasing because of inflation. So is the soft cost. And government charges have never ever gone down. They've only ever gone up. So just because the market comes down and your market sale price comes down doesn't mean everything else comes down. It all comes out of your profit margin. So that's why you're seeing a lot of developers hold back units and wait, so that when they do sell, they can make a healthy profit and have a healthy business. Okay? Second point that's really important to realize. Who's making the most money here? The developer or the government? Think about that for a second. Now, we all know we pay a lot of taxes here in Canada. That's not a surprise. And some of those taxes are necessary to, have government services and public services, parks and roads and healthcare and all the other stuff, right? But, there's something that's not right here, okay? There's something that's not right, because the government, especially the federal government and now the provincial government, has been crying and yelling about affordable housing for a long time. They want affordable housing, but yet But yet, in this building, they are taking the biggest chunk in taxes and government fees, more than the developer. I would think that if they wanted more housing and they wanted to make it easier for developers to build housing and for you to buy housing and own it or rent it or live in it, that they would reduce their government charges and not add more, which they're doing in Toronto called inclusionary zoning. That's another conversation altogether, right? That's another conversation altogether. Now, that's the part that doesn't make sense to me. So when they're crying for affordable housing, you have to know that they're the ones taking the biggest chunk out of here. And to be fair, they're the ones that have the biggest control over the price, because these soft costs, construction costs, and land value aren't going down. They always go up. It's inflationary. This, you could say taxes are in a sense inflationary also, but they control how much and where the taxes go. So when they need more housing, they need to stimulate that. And they can stimulate that by making it easier, removing red tape, okay? Make it easier to develop, go through the development process, removing the red tape, okay, and reducing the charges. Take a look. Out of an average cost of a $750,000 condo in Toronto, $159,000 is taxes. Between HST, City of Toronto, DC's development charges, okay, land transfer tax, building permits, education charges, parkland dedication, mortgage insurance, and all these other small taxes, okay, you're 160 grand out of 750. That's a crazy number, okay. That's probably about 20%, without doing an exact calculation there. So you need to understand this when you see developments happening. That the point is the developers are shaving profits where they can, but the biggest chunk of profit out of the building and why things continue to go up in price comes from here.